Hey, I'm PH and welcome to Good Bible Knowledge with PhD. In this set of videos, I want to answer common questions about the Bible in a fun and creative way, and I hope these videos will be helpful in your own spiritual journey in Jesus. Let's get started. Who is Esther? When Israel was conquered by the Babylonian Empire, many of the people were taken captive and deported to Babylon. 70 years later, Babylon was conquered by Persia, and the Israelites began returning to Israel, and they returned in 3 major exoduses. The first under Zerubbabel, the second under Ezra, and finally under Nehemiah. However, some of the Israelites chose to stay in Persia, and among these was a woman named Esther. The story of Esther begins as Xerxes, the king of Persia, decided to display his wealth and power in a great feast, inviting all the nobles and governors. On the 7th day of the festivities, Xerxes called for his wife, Queen Vashti, to wear her royal crown and flaunt her beauty before the crowd. The queen, however, refused, publicly embarrassing the king, and Vashti was summarily banished from the king's presence. Sometime later, when the king's anger subsided, he decreed that all of the most beautiful women in the kingdom shall be brought before the king for him to choose a new queen, and they were subjected to 12 months of beauty treatment, and each with 7 maids in attendance, and one by one they were brought into the king's presence. Esther, a Jewish orphan, was among these women. Esther was raised by her godly uncle Mordecai, who wisely instructed Esther not to disclose her Jewish heritage. Esther immediately won the heart of the king, who made her the new queen of Persia, and she was brought in to live in the palace. Every day, Mordecai faithfully waited by the palace gate to hear news of Esther. One day, Mordecai overheard 2 of the king's servants plotting to assassinate the king. He quickly notified Esther, who informed the king, and the would-be assassins were immediately arrested and executed. Though Mordecai received no reward for saving the king's life, God had other plans, as this incident was recorded in the Royal Chronicle. After some time, Haman, a Persian noble, gained favor in the eyes of the king and was promoted over all the high officials in the kingdom. And Xerxes commanded that everyone must bow down to Haman whenever he passed by. However, Mordecai, who feared God alone, refused, disobeying the king's order. This infuriated Haman, who not only sought retribution against Mordecai, but upon all of the Jewish people. Unaware of Esther's true heritage, Haman approached the king, asking for a royal edict that on the 13th day of the 1st month, the residents of Persia shall take up arms and slaughter all the Israelites living in the land. As this wicked edict was proclaimed to the people, Mordecai tore his clothes in despair, and all the Jews throughout the kingdom sought the Lord in fasting and prayer. Esther, who was uninformed of the king's edict, was troubled to hear that her uncle was in great distress, and she sent a servant to provide new garments for Mordecai. Mordecai sent back a copy of the king's edict, entreating Esther to go to the king immediately and beg him to rescind his command. This was not as easy as it seemed. Esther informed Mordecai that anyone who approaches the king uninvited will be immediately executed, including the queen. The only exception is in the rare case that the king extends his royal scepter. In the face of most certain death, Esther was understandably hesitant to agree to Mordecai's request, to which Mordecai replied, "Do not think that behind the walls of this palace you will be safe from the same fate of your people. If you keep silent, God will pass you by and find another to save his people. Esther, is it not possible that all this has happened to you for such a time as this?" With these convicting words of rebuke, Esther called her servants to join in fasting and prayer as she prepared to approach the king. What can we learn from this first part of the story of Esther? God chose Esther out of hundreds of women to become queen of Persia, not for her to enjoy the wealth and comfort of a queen, but that she would eventually become the savior of her people. Mordecai's timely words remind us that all that is given by God can be easily taken and given to another if we do not use what we have been given to do what is right and honoring to God. Jesus, the King of Kings, gave up all the glory of heaven to come to earth as a servant, to die on the cross. And Jesus was willing to sacrifice himself so that God's will would be done in bringing about the salvation of everyone who would believe. Stay tuned for the conclusion of the book of Esther. We'll see you next time.